All right, so we are on Principle 1 Testimony in Lesson 2. It says, "Hi, my name is John. I'm a believer who struggles with alcoholism. My story is all about God taking me back when I finally gave up on doing it my way. You see, I had a great start in life. I was raised in a good Christian home, and I was the child prodigy in my church, and many predicted that I would take over for Billy Graham when he retired. Later in life, I earned a master's degree from Fuller Seminary. In essence, I was trained for a life of ministry. I threw all of that away, however, for what the Bible calls the lust of the flesh, and what I thought was a call to freedom. But how did that happen? As you will see, I made the mistake of thinking that I was strong enough to live life on my own terms. My earliest memories are about God and Jesus, and I remember asking my dad, why doesn't everybody believe in Jesus? It's just so easy. At the time, I was praying that Nikita Khrushchev would become a Christian, and my dad answered, when you get older, you'll understand, because it gets harder to believe. My dad meant no harm, but the mind of a 7-year-old is a tender thing, and I took his observation as a mandate. If I was going to grow up, I was going to have doubts. Shortly thereafter, I began to lose confidence in my relationship with God. The struggle to rediscover a simple childlike faith would be the defining theme of my life for the next 40 years. I discovered binge drinking in college during my senior year, but the need to try and earn God's acceptance persisted. If anybody could get God to give them a standing ovation, I was going to be that man. I married a good Christian girl from a good Christian home and entered Fuller Seminary. I had been a lazy undergrad student. Consequently, I had two things to prove. First, that I was indeed the spiritual giant my dad and others had always expected me to be, and second, that my intellectual prowess had no equal. I graduated from Fuller with a 3.8 GPA, a master's degree in divinity, and some major anxiety attacks. You see, all that head knowledge was worthless because I was performing a religion for God instead of having a relationship with Him. My self-doubts about God's salvation had spread to all areas of my life. I had even begun to doubt my very manhood, so I entered therapy. There, I found that much of my low self-esteem could be explained away by an overactive inner parent who constantly demanded perfection. Good sound psychology as far as it goes, but it fell short of the saving conclusion that the big book states that we have to all make. Any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. But Jesus put it away in the real big book called the Bible. Whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me and for the gospel will save it. And that's Mark 8:35. So after starting a PhD program in historical theology, I left Fuller and joined the business world. About a year later, a woman who was like a second mother to me suddenly died of a brain tumor. In spite of my pleading with God, Jan died that night, and I completed my walk away from God. Instead of turning to Him in this time of loss, I used that dear woman's death as a convenient excuse to give up on God and satisfy all of my pent-up desires for wine, women, and song. I was riding high in 1984. I had plenty of money, a home in the Anaheim Hills, and I was surrounded by women who were openly available. I began to commit adultery after 9 years of marriage. My excuse for being unfaithful was that my wife was not exciting enough. Excuses helped me to justify a divorce. Excuses and alcohol always gave me a way to deny the pain and deny what I had become, which was totally self-centered and egotistical. I found a gorgeous girlfriend who looked good on my arm, and I went into party mode for the balance of the 80s. Alcohol and cocaine were the order for the day. Believe it or not, that gorgeous girlfriend became my wife and remains my wife to this day, in spite of all of the hurt and heartache that I have caused in her life. In 1993, our daughter was born. My little girl made me start to realize that I was not the center of the universe. I knew my family should be the center, but I continued to drink and act like an irresponsible adolescent. Finally, in early 1994, my wife told me that enough was enough. That was my wake-up call. I knew that I had to get my life together or I was going to lose my wife and my little girl, both of whom I loved with all of my heart. I stopped going out to the bars, but I did continue to drink at home. Drinking became a way to pass out every night and perpetuate the denial that had become my existence. It took another 2 years, but in March of '96, at the urging of my wife, we started attending Saddleback. Every Sunday, always nursing a hangover, I would be moved to tears by the music. God, through the pastor, would touch my heart with some observation from the Bible that all of my enormous Bible study skills had never uncovered before. One Sunday, another John from our Celebrate Recovery group gave his testimony, and like me, he was a functional alcoholic. His story and the ministry of this church made me start to hope again that it was possible to have a relationship with a God of love rather than a God of judgment. June 11th, 1996 was my first day of sobriety. I came to our recovery meeting with the feeling that there was no place else to go. If I mentioned all of the men in this group that have helped me on the road to recovery, we would be here a lot longer than the time that I have been allotted. However, I have to mention my brother Kenny. That first night, with a lot of love and not a lot of formal education, he helped me, Mr. Intellectual, complete 4-word sentences as I tried to explain why I was there. On day 8, I wrote this in my journal. I am still searching for a God that I know is there. Perhaps my God is too small, and perhaps he is not there. I fervently hope that this is not true because I have nowhere else to go. I knew beyond any doubt that alcohol was just a symptom. I was in a life or death search for the God who could make sense of my life. And on June 26, after a short meeting with the pastor, one verse he shared with me finally cut through every bit of denial. And that was Psalm 46:10, "Be still and know that I am God." It was as if God was saying to me, stop trying to maintain the facade. Stop making excuses for your life. That's why I died for you. Be still, relax, and accept my gift of freedom. I came home to my Abba, my daddy in heaven, like the prodigal son who finally realized that being a servant in his father's house was much better than living in a pig pen on his own. I finally admitted how much I did need God's help to manage my life, and when I did, he welcomed me home with great joy and a party, as told in Luke 15:23. God threw for me and my family a big party that was overwhelming. In less than a month, my wife and I were baptized together by the pastor, joined Saddleback Church, and dedicated our little girl to God. I continued to be amazed at the peace I felt as I learned to let go of my own control and allow God to direct me. For the first time in 40 years, I'm praying an adult version of the prayer that I prayed at the age of 7. God, thank you. Life is so simple when I turn everything over to you. The belief of a child, tempered by 40 years of life, gives me peace and a serenity that I never imagined possible. So that is it for this week. We will pick up next week with lesson 3, and that will deal with hope.